So recently I had like a cooking test at my work where I had to study a bunch of like recipes and sauces and learn how to prep everything under like a time limit. And it's something that's been on my mind for a while because I've been like studying and practicing so I could pass the test because I really wanted the race. But I thought that it could be a great relation to the Bible because the Bible provides guidance and recipes for living a godly life, a life which is pleasing to God. And with that, I wanted to start in Isaiah chapter 55. Starting in chapter 8, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." And while I'm cooking it up at Panda, I can't just start throwing whatever ingredients I want, whatever procedure I want to do, and just expect it to end out how it's supposed to. Just like the same way in life, you can't just throw in whatever you want in your life. Maybe I'll do a little bit of studying, or maybe I'm just going to put it off for today, or just do whatever you want, and then come back to the Lord. It's not going to end out well for you. You're going to be in a spot that's far from the Lord. So you have to make sure to just stick according to the procedure of the Bible in order to end up where you want to end up. And also, if you flipped over to James 4, James 4, verse 14. It says, "Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in arrogance. All such boasting is evil." And the reason I bring this up is because we do not know what will happen tomorrow. And just like I had a test, our whole life is basically a test of faith. And we're limited on time. So really we have to always check ourselves and ask ourselves for what is our life, because naturally we'll just fade away from God if we don't really do the effort and put in the effort to get closer and study. So really we have to think about each and every day, what are we doing to get closer to the Lord? That's all I had to share.
Psalm 139, verse 1 and 2. Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. We are continuing in our series of the Psalms. I won't ask if anyone remembers the Psalms that we've gone through, but we have gone through a few. Psalm 14, great Psalm. Psalm 64, Psalm 84. Breaking tradition with a Psalm ending in a 4, we're going to be in Psalm 139 today. Actually, in studying this, I thought, so I'm a fan of the Psalms, as we've talked about. Psalms are amazing. They have a lot of good stuff in them. A lot of people think they're pretty songs or great poems. They are all of that. However, there's some really good truths in there as well. Really things that should captivate us as far as our service, as far as what we do every day. See, as much as we can look forward to the future and really want to be in the Lord's kingdom and really focus on that, it takes everyday effort. And so what the Psalms are is they help us with understanding what that means. What does that look like? We're studying on Wednesday nights. We just got done with studying the Overcomer. But what does that look like? What does that mean? And that's part of what I think has been sort of a theme for us so far is doing the little things each day that add up. That it's not this big concept of the kingdom or this big concept of bridal relationship, this big concept of the future and all of that. It's the little everyday things. It's the everyday overcoming that is so important. And in this psalm, that's exactly what we're going to see. We see that throughout the Psalms. But we see David's connection to God in this psalm. So I'm going to break this up into two parts. Psalm 139, it's long enough. We're going to break this up into two parts. So it'll be this week and next week. And so we're going to start off with this week about the greatness of God. The greatness of God and how he touches our lives. Okay, so I want us to think. In fact, close your eyes. Let's do this. This will be interesting. Close your eyes. Think about a beautiful day. Think about where are you? A beautiful day. You're outside. Are you in a meadow? Are you in the mountains? Are you on the beach? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? Is it windy? If you're being realistic, it's windy. Are you with people you love? What does the perfect day look like? All right, open your eyes. That looks different for each and every one of us. The perfect day, the perfect scenario, the perfect situation is different for all of us. It may include loved ones. It may include loved ones or friends that we've lost, having them back. It may include having a good cry. It may include having a good laugh. It may include walking along the beach. In my wife's head, that's what hers was, walking along the beach. It was not in the mountains, and it certainly wasn't 40 below. The perfect day is different for all of us, but yet for us, it means something. So picture the beauty and essence of what we see. What do we see? We see mountains, which are beautiful, the beach, which is beautiful, the endless skyline, which is beautiful. Did you know the creator of all those has an interest in you? He wants relationship with you. He's seeking you, as we're going to see. So in these two parts, we're going to look at the acknowledgement of God, the creator, God, the Almighty, God's presence, and what that means and how it touches our lives individually through the eyes of maybe the greatest king that Israel has ever known. The one in whom his throne is the one that the Messiah will sit on for all eternity. That one. The one who messed up. The one who sinned a horrible sin. The one who didn't want that communication, that relationship with God by messing up. And then he begged God to come back. And God called him the apple of his eye. The shepherd, the nobody, the overlooked shepherd boy who was not even an option to face the mighty Philistine named Goliath. The one who wouldn't let the Philistine mock and belittle the name of God. Who is this guy? This 50-foot huge behemoth of a man. Who is he to mock the God of Israel? This little ruddy, good-looking kid stands up to him and with one shot of a sling knocks him cold, dead, cuts his head off, takes it to Jerusalem. That guy, that young kid who had a long history with God is still in awe with God. And so in verse 1, he says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." What does that mean? What does that imply? Right? These words are in there for a reason. You have searched me, length of time. You have known me, relationship. We've been in relationship for a length of time. I know you, but in this case, you know me. You have searched me and known me. And he calls him Lord. Relationship. He takes it one step further. Because of who you are, you know my sitting down. You know my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You know me, God, better than I know myself. You know when I'm walking, you know when I'm sitting, you know when I'm relaxing, you know when I'm everything. You know my thoughts, good and bad. And so as we look at this, we see that the God that he's talking to, it's not just the God who knows everything. Take note of this. It's not just the God who knows everything. It's the God who knows me. It's not just the God who's everywhere. It's the God who's everywhere with me. It's not just the God who created everything. It's the God who created me. That's who this relationship is with. And we can intimate, and we know from history, this length of time that David had with God. And yet he's still reminding him, Lord, with this relationship, you've searched me, you know me. You're not just the God of all, you're the God who knows me. What did Jesus tell his disciples? That God even knows the very number of hairs on your head. That's the intimate relationship he's looking for. He knows it, but he wants us to willingly submit to that knowledge. Brother Frank's easy to count. Number of hairs on his head. Getting there, brother. That's the kind of relationship that Brother Frank wants with God. He wants that closeness. He wants God to be in his life. He wants God to be watching him, monitoring him. God didn't just know the smallest aspects of his life. He didn't just know when he was up and down and here and there and this battle and that battle. He knew his thoughts. Isn't that what he says? You don't just know him, you understand my thoughts afar off. You ever thought about that? God knows our thoughts. This has been a theme the last couple months too. I can put on a fancy $10 suit, $5 tie, and do my thing. But God knows our thoughts. That's scary. But it means that we need to be legit with God. We need to be legit in our service. Brethren, that's why we worship the Almighty God. He's contrasting the other gods of the era, the other gods that were these fake, false things that existed. Ironically enough, made from the elements that God himself created. Wood, gold, silver, bronze, metal, all of that. God created those elements, and then man fashioned them into idols to worship, as if to give glory to them instead of the Almighty God who created them. David knew better. Verse 3 says, you comprehend my path, my lying down. You're acquainted with all my ways. You're familiar with all my ways. I often ask this. I have historically asked this of spouses. In 1,000 people, could you pick your spouse out? I don't want to know the answer to that. That's up to you to figure out. But I'm going to tell you, God can. God knows who you are. God knows what you're up to. God is acquainted with all my ways, for there is not a word on my tongue. But behold, O Lord, you know it all together. He says stuff like this. God knowing our tongue should affect our speech. Are we saying dumb things? Are we saying things that God wouldn't be happy with? Those who claim to be disciples should remember that God hears and knows every word we speak. The Bible talks vehemently about the tongue and how important it is, especially in our witness. In verse 5, he says, you have hedged me behind and before. and laid your hand upon me. This isn't relationship, brethren. David is feeling this. He's feeling this protection. He's talking about this hedge. Bible talks about a hedge as a protective barrier. God talks about hedging in the front, hedging in the back, protecting his covenant people, protecting those who follow him. If he told Israel, if you serve me, I'll protect you. I'll fight your battles. You think Israel won those battles on their own? That was God protecting, hedging behind. Picture a time in your life when you felt safest. When did you feel safest? Many of us revert back to childhood, holding mom or dad's hand. Maybe it was a spouse's hand, and you're walking along and you felt protected. You felt safe in that moment. Like there wasn't anything in the world that could get you. That's what God offers to his people. He offers protection. He's able to hedge on every side. Almost as if I'm not going to allow anything that happens to you, I'll have to allow. But in the meantime, I'm going to protect you. So what was true of David is true for all of us who trust in the Lord. I don't know if you've noticed, we watch a couple shows, police shows. On Patrol Live is a good one. Come to find out, they're following the Fontana Police Department starting this past Friday. So that ought to be interesting. I kind of want to watch and kind of don't want to watch to know what's going on in the city right next door. But we see a lot of times when officers get involved, they want to look at the surveillance camera. Doesn't it feel like we're just on camera all the time? It feels like everywhere we go, you can look around. There's cameras in cars. There's cameras on bodies. It's funny because when something like a crime happens in the old days, sorry, I don't know why I'm looking at you, Sean, but in our day, not looking at Sean the rest of the time, in the old days, people would go help. Now they do this. And that's good and bad. It's probably helpful for the police, don't get me wrong. But somebody's getting their face kicked in. Put your phone down and go intervene. Sheesh. Did the kids still say sheesh? Okay. Never mind then. Come on. But it feels like we're always on camera. We're on camera all the time. We're constantly being watched, constantly being monitored. There's a deeper eschatological issue there. There's a thing that's there, okay? It's for the end times. It's for monitoring who's doing it, who's not. So I understand all that. But just because there's cameras on you doesn't mean you feel safe. You know when I feel safe? When I know God is watching me. When I know God has his eyes on me. The creator, the almighty creator of the universe has his eyes on me. And David knew that. God, why do you care? But picture this relationship. Verse 5, you've hedged me behind and before. And how about this? You laid your hand on me. This hand that went like that and created all things has his hand on us, protecting us, guiding us. When I asked about when you felt safest, I picture holding hands. I picture arm around, right? I picture a nearness. God's got his hand on me. Not only in love, but also protection. When Zion was little, she used to be this little. Right there. I used to put my hand on her head and guide her around like this, just because it was fun. It was for my entertainment only. But I'd put my hand on and just guide her around, and she'd be whoa, whoa, like doing all of that. But that's what it feels like. It feels like that protection. I'm watching over Zion. In this case, God is watching over David, and he's watching over us. The child who's comforted by a loving parent who watches over them. When we're confident in the love and care of God our Father, his constant knowledge for us is a comfort, not a curse. We want him to know us. That hedge was an expression of love and protection. And so it's not the hand that's on us. It's not the hand of correction. It can be, but it's the hand of grace. That God is there watching over us. David knew this in verse 5. He understood that God knew him better than he knew himself. What a wonderful and humble place to be, that we serve a God who knows us. See, the other nations couldn't say that. You think those wooden statues in a building knew the ins and outs of the people that came and went? They didn't know them. And so we see that with God. And David realizes that. David realizes the importance of that. Verse 6. I love David's response to this. So he says, you know my sitting down. You know my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend. These are all action words. These are all verbs, right? These are all action. Like, what is he doing? What is God doing? You know, you understand, you comprehend my path and my lying down. You're acquainted with all my ways. You know my tongue. You know what's going on with my words, my speech. In fact, God, you know it all together. You've hedged me behind and before. You've laid your hand on me. So what does David say? This should be our reaction to this. That's why I asked you for the perfect day, because the perfect day typically involves being in God's creation. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Wow. You could say that this knowledge is too wonderful for me. Here are some other terms. I cannot grasp it. And I can't hold on to the thought of that. I can hardly endure thinking of it. The theme of that overwhelms me. I love that word, overwhelms me. It's so overcoming to me, like I just can't picture this happening. I'm amazed. I'm astonished by it. Yes, I right-clicked and did some synonyms in Word. Thank you for asking. So these are the words that came out. I can't even picture it. It overwhelms me. I'm amazed. I'm astonished. I love this one. Such knowledge not only surpasses my comprehension, but I can't even imagine that, God, you care that much about me, that you're deeply involved in these first 5 verses of this song, that God cares so much about us, that the knowledge for David was too wonderful. It's too high. It's like that jar of pickles on the top shelf, the pantry. Can't get it. You need some help. You need a tall friend to get that jar of pickles. If you little or shorter, right, it's too high. I can't attain. This knowledge is so up there. This knowledge is so incomprehensible to know that God does this. Yet, David knew it. He knew that God wanted relationship with him. He knew that God provided this protection, that God knew his words, knew his actions. Brethren, how do we feel about that? How do we feel about that? Is it creepy? Is it eerie? Is it kind of trippy? That God's watching us constantly no matter what we're doing? Brethren, he does it with people who even don't believe. He's doing it all the time. So why not succumb to him? Believe him. Submit to him. And let him direct. Nothing to be ashamed of if we're not doing anything we're ashamed of. Knowing God is watching. God's watching all of man. He takes a particular interest in those who follow him. Verse 7. This theme continues. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? He's saying it in a manner that is rhetorical, because he knows he can't. It's sort of like it's kind of a duh moment. Like, well, why would I vote if it's going to get tweaked anyway? Or, what? Just the first thing I thought of. I've been watching too much stuff again this week. Why do this if this is going to happen, right? Why go to work when I'm severely underpaid anyway? He's saying that. He's saying, where can I go? Your spirit is there. Your presence is there. Not that he wants to, but it's talking about the overall presence of God. Where can I flee from your presence? And then he takes it to the extreme. He goes all sides when he says, if I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in the grave, you're there. If I take wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me. In fact, it's your right hand that holds me. Guys, this is relationship with God. David knew it. He's talking about it. He's singing about it. He's poetrying about it. He's talking about it openly and lovingly. Brethren, if we don't have this kind of relationship with God, let's get it. Because this is what it's about. This is what it's about. David knew that. David knew he was in covenant. He knew about Israel. He knew he was king. He knew all of that. But it means nothing if we're not in relationship with God. So important. None of the other stuff matters if we don't first realize who God is. So here David speaks of God as a person everywhere in creation. He is creation, but he's also distinct from creation. In these verses, what does he say? He says, your spirit, your presence, you are there, your hand, your right hand. In fact, darkness doesn't even hide from you. The fact that God is everywhere. Interesting word here. I know many of you know this Greek word, mipenicha, right? We all know that Greek, or that Hebrew word, right? We all know that word. It means faces. So this presence is actually from your faces, plural. He knows about the Godhead. This is a plural God. God is everywhere. The Father, the Son, the Spirit, it's everywhere. It's on purpose that we're talking about the plural head of God. And so we see his Spirit, we see his presence, we see talking to the Father, knowing a Son was coming. The plurality of the persons of God is intentional. This mipenicha is simply faces. It's from your faces, from your presence, from all of you. I love this one too. If you take up wings of the morning. I kind of struggled with this one a little bit, but I thought wings of the morning, wings, speed, right? We'll see that when we study Daniel. The wings intended speed. So what happens in the morning? Light. That God's presence even may refer to the spread and speed of light as it goes across the sky in the morning. That light itself can't actually outrun God's presence, and it can't outrun God's knowledge. That David was assured of the constant presence of God's hand of love and care. That not even death or the grave could stop that. Brother, what kind of relationship do we have with God? This is God who wants you. Do we want God? That's for us to answer. David did. David's one of the greats. David's on the Mount Rushmore of Davids, right? Sorry, David. But he's on, sorry, Brother Cook. But he's on the Mount Rushmore. You two are also on there, of course. But he's on the Mount Rushmore. This is King David. This isn't a slouch. This isn't one of us. This isn't me. Some slouch, some guy. This is King David, who warmed the throne for the Messiah. And he's seeking relationship with God. Why aren't we? Why aren't we doing everything to attain this, to grasp at it, to hold on to it? Further, more importantly, when we get it, not let it go. What did Jesus talk about? You find a treasure in a field. You sell everything, you buy the field. You find a pearl, you sell everything, you buy the pearl. This relationship with God should be first and front and center in our lives. Dang, something smells good. What is that? Holy buckets. Something smells good. This is going to wrap up real quick here. David was so assured of the constant presence of God's hand of love and care that not even death could do it. Let's go to Romans chapter 8. Let's go over there. Romans chapter 8. You know who sought relationship with God? Our Anabaptist brethren. They wanted a relationship with God. Even if it cost them their lives, they wanted a relationship with God. They wanted to be counted among those who stayed separate from the government state religion that was pummeling God's people. Segue to this afternoon. It's real. That government was just led by the devil doing what the devil wanted him to do. And so today we see the devil using other means to try to trip us up. David didn't want that. He wanted to understand God's presence. Romans 8:38. For I am persuaded, Paul writes, that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Guess who else got it? Paul got it. Paul got it. He understood the importance of that presence, that not wanting to be separate from God. Brethren, if we're separate from God today, let's get back. If you don't know God, today is the day. Brethren, God is wanting a relationship with you. David sees it. He doesn't want to let it go. In fact, God's right hand, remember that right hand was the hand of skill, the hand of strength. He would hold David no matter what was to come. Paul knew he would hold on to him. God's presence with David was as constant as light in the darkness. Sort of like Exodus 13. Exodus 13. Exodus 13:21. Backdrop. They've been freed from Egypt. Israel's been freed from Egypt. They are now headed out toward the Red Sea, where God will once again perform another miracle. The miracle wasn't enough that God freed them from Egypt, killed all the firstborn, all of that. We're going to study the firstborn at some point. Wasn't a miracle enough there. How about this? And the Red Sea miracle is coming. But in verse 21, verse 20, so they took their journey from Succoth and camped in Etham. at the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. You want to talk about feeling safe. Can you imagine that? You're walking during the day and there's this cloud following you. And it's dark. But yet there's a pillar of fire following you. That was God's presence. So early Israel, freshly freed Israel, knew God's protection early on. Brother, this protection is available to us. Let's go back to Psalm 139. This protection is available to us. But like David, we have to want it. We have to want this. Verse 12. Verse 10. Verse 11. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light around me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day, and the darkness and the light are both alike to you. There's no difference. God doesn't take weekends, holidays, nighttime, overtime. God is there all the time. And we have to believe that. God is always there for us. Darkness and the light doesn't matter. God is there. Now, this same eternal God who knows me inside and out, who created all things, including light and darkness, now he's going to turn his attention to himself. And this will be our last passage for this week. Verse 13. Oh boy. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you. Why? For I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. Relationship. My soul knows very well who you are, what you've done. You formed my inward parts. You were there before I was a thing. You were there creating me, separating child from mother's womb, saying that even in that stage, you knew who I was. David was a remarkable man. He was a shepherd. He was a soldier. He was a hero. He was a poet. He was a king. But yet here he's going to add a new title. You ready for David's new title? Scientist. That's right. David knew biology. He knew that where life began, where God was there. He declared openly that God, I will praise you because you have fearfully and wonderfully made me. Now, I am no biologist. Brother Albert, that surprises you, and don't let it. It's okay. I'm no biologist. But I see, when I watch documentaries, as I often do, Brother Frank, the intricacies of the human body. Has anyone ever studied this? Let me tell you what didn't happen. It didn't happen by accident. Okay? It did not happen by accident. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. God created mankind with design. And he did it because he wanted relationship with him. Why is he talking to Adam in the garden? He's communing. He's walking with God. He wanted relationship with someone made in his likeness and his image. Genesis 1:26. Let us make man in our image. And so David, the new scientist, says that God, even before I was out of my mother's womb, you watched me, you knew me. I think you know where I'm kind of going with that. God's watching over those not yet born. The workings of the human body, just by design and execution, are incredible. Maybe God's greatest work of art. And today, we know far more than David ever did about this stuff. They didn't have cameras. They didn't have x-rays and what's the other one? MRIs or ultrasounds. You ever seen an ultrasound of a 2-month-along baby? Okay, yeah, fresh. 3-month-along baby. It's incredible. Incredible and real. He didn't have any idea about, do you think no one knew about nerves and ligaments? You think David knew about that stuff? Blood vessels? You think he knew about an Achilles tendon or an ACL? I'm just going off of football injuries. Those are the only body parts I know, is if they're injured and are affecting my team, that's how I know. Bad shoulder, rotator cuff. You think David knew about that stuff? No. They didn't have the advancements in everything we do now. But David knew enough to stand in awe of what God had done. He knew enough to stand in awe and humility in front of God for saying, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Incredible. What are other words for marvelous? Throw them out there. Incredible, right? Fantastic. What's another word? Marvelous. Wonderful. Stupendous. Spectacular. Right? What are some other good words? Glorious. Did I say incredible already? Let's go with it again. Incredible are your works. Fantastic are your works. God, you are the creator of all things. I didn't know anything about anatomy. I think they were looking at it. Probably in those days, you tore your ACL. They'd take you in the back and shoot you. I don't know if that's true, but they probably, you certainly weren't worth anything as a soldier. And back then it took 5 years to recover. But instead, he's saying the complete opposite. He's saying, I will praise you. I will stand in awe, incredible awesomeness of how we're made. Fearfully and wonderfully. Marvelous are your works, and that your soul knows very well. Verse 15. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, skillfully wrought, put together in the lowest parts of the earth. I love this. This Hebrew word for wrought, you know what it means? Picture this. This is what it means. Embroidered. Embroidered. Stitched together. Lord, when I was being stitched and put together, you knew who I was. That's where you knew, here's someone I can work with. Brethren, every person has value. Every person has opportunity to find God. Every person is made in the image and likeness of God. Even the guy who came to our house at 10:30 last night asking for a blanket, he has value. Now, I don't see him here today, but he was invited. Because everyone should be invited. Brethren, we are the people of God, and there's not a single human out there who's not worth anything. Because as much as we're the people of God. That's great. But we all started somewhere. And brethren, we need to find more people and show them God. Because they're made in his likeness and image as well. And they were embroidered together at a young age. And then the story began. And sometimes they're horrible stories. But brethren, they need God. A woman found in adultery was cast before Jesus' feet. Cast before his feet. What are we going to do? The law says stone her. What did Jesus say? He who is without sin, throw the first stone. Brother, everybody has value. And we need to go find the people of value. Because it's everybody. Everyone. David is not talking about just the people of God. He's talking about humanity was fearfully and wonderfully made. Jesus didn't go after the high profile, you guys. He didn't go after the high and mighty, the Pharisees, the people who walked around like they had to use the restroom. He went after the nobodies, the afterthoughts, the scum, the people who smelled like fish. And their names are on the foundations of the city for eternity. What does that tell you? David had a man killed. David was a murderer and an adulterer. And he murdered to cover up his adultery. How about that? He's the apple of God's eye. God knows we don't have to be perfect, but we do need to be righteous. And these people overcame their stories, their problems, their issues. Then we're going to see next week their anxieties and their problems. And they put God first over all that. Friends, that's an overcomer. Overcome the bad hand you've gotten dealt. We all could complain that Dad didn't hug us enough. Or my third grade teacher yelled at me a lot. Okay, me too. I have a funny story about that, of course. So we moved from California to Montana, because that's what most people do. Moved from California to Montana. The week before I started public school, third grade, Russell Elementary. Proud alum. Third grade. My first iteration into public school. I get told a story by my neighbor friend, Mike Hoppe. Hoppe. Weird family. Ask me about it later. This kid says, you came just in time. Why? Because last week, Miss Clapwick threw a kid against the chalkboard. That was the 80s. Nobody cared back then. She picked him up and threw him against the chalkboard. That could mess with some people. But brethren, overcome it. This is serious stuff. David overcame it and said, God, I get it. I want relationship with you the way you want with me. We have to know that. Oh, this is perfect knowledge that God has. Even when we can't see, even when we're blinded by our anxieties and our problems and our issues and the things that cause us to struggle, God is there. That's why he says, give me the wheel. You sit here, you hand me the steering wheel, and let me drive. Brethren, I don't know how people do it. I don't know how people do it without God. I don't want to find out. I have found out. I don't want to find out again. So when someone comes to your house at 10:30 and asks for a blanket, invite them to church. Because everyone is fearfully and wonderfully made. And it's our message that supersedes the issues and problems that people have. The message of Christ. The message of Christ coming. The message of Christ coming, dying, and being resurrected. Sitting at the right hand of the Father, only to come back and collect a people who were faithful to him, who overcame the I didn't get enough hugs or I got slammed on the chalkboard in 3rd grade. They overcame that. And they realized that God should take precedence, that I am made in his image. And so God knew David's days. Oh, he says this right here in verse 16. We'll finish it up. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed. Yikes. Yeah. Every life has value. Every life has value. I feel bad for the people who don't think so. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. And in your book, they are all written. The days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. Even before there was this history with God, God was there. God saw it. I love how David has used this multiple times about God having a book. Let's go to Psalm 51. A couple more, then we'll call it good. Psalm 51. Now, God doesn't, have a book to remember things. Sometimes, right, we take notes. I have a little book that I write little things down. I've just got kind of like things I need to buy or whatever. Psalm 51:1, have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness. Now, let's make this clear. David is in a down spot right here. Okay, when he starts off his song, have mercy on me, O God. And later on, he's saying, purge me with hyssop, wash me. Okay, clearly, David's at a down point. But in verse 1, he continues by saying, have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies. Have mercy on me, O God. In fact, you know what I'm asking you to do? Delete. Blot out the transgressions. Forget what I've done. Brethren, he can do that for you. It's called grace. And it's already paid for. We just need to go to him and ask. The ultimate sacrifice has already given us the pathway to grace and success. Psalm 69. Psalm 69. David's in trouble. Verse 17, you can see what kind of trouble. He says, do not hide your face from your servant, for I am in trouble. Hear me speedily. That's the kind of psalm this is. Prior to that, he says, deliver me out of the mire. Let me not sink. Let me be delivered from those who hate me out of the deep waters. Okay, so this is the kind of psalm that is. So in verse 28, he says, verse 27, add iniquity to their iniquity, and let them not come into your righteousness. Put them aside, stop them. And in verse 20, he says, let them be blotted out of the book of the living and not be written with the righteous. God is keeping track. This omnipresence, this omniscience, he's there, he's watching, he's keeping track. He knows what we do. He knows where we are. He knows where we are spiritually. He knows where we are physically. He knows where we are mentally. And he wants us anyway. He wants us anyway. So today, as we end the first part of this psalm, the call goes out. God knows us anyway. Let's applaud that. Let's be thankful for that instead of running from it. Why run from a God who can see you run? Why not worship him and turn the tables on what might have seemed creepy to other people and might be creepy to people you talk to. For us, God, I'm thankful that you are all knowing. You know, God could easily pull up a name when the devil came to pay him a visit. God asked the devil, he said, where you come from? So I walking around the earth. You know, since I was cast down. Still have access, obviously. That's a Revelation thing. We'll talk about that at some point, where the devil finally gets kicked out for good. Here the devil goes up to God and he says, I've been walking around the earth. Well, you knew what he was doing. He's trying to trip people up. So what does God say? Have you considered my servant Job? Have you looked at Job? Have you thought about Job? Have you seen Job? Have you seen what Job can do? Have you seen his faithfulness? Because I'm watching him from sunup to sundown. I know his thoughts. I know that he's fearfully and wonderfully made. I knew him in the womb. I know him now. God threw Job out there because he knew he was faithful. Brethren, the devil does this every day. Does God mention our name as one that the devil can put to test? Or is God worried that we may not pass? Brethren, that's up to us. We can decide that by choosing to put God first. He's everywhere, but he's everywhere with us if we believe. So let's stand this morning. Let's contemplate the words of Psalm 139. The second part of that will be next week.